We were reading about the sufferings of the avatar, the one who comes to save the world. He has to experience the pain of the world. He has to identify himself with the pain of the world. No? But when God's messenger comes to help the world and lead the soul of earth to higher things, he too must carry the yoke he came to unloose. He too must bear the pang that he would heal. Exempt and unafflicted by earth's fate, how shall he cure the ills he never felt? He covers the world's agony with his calm. But though to the outward eye no sign appears, and peace is given to our torn human hearts, the struggle is there, and paid the unseen price. The fire, the strife, the wrestle are within. He carries the suffering world in his own breast. Its sins weigh on his thoughts. Its grief is his. Earth's ancient load lies heavy on his soul. Night and its powers beleaguer his tardy steps. The Titan adversary's clutch he bears. His march is a battle and a pilgrimage. Life's evil smites. He is stricken with the world's pain. A million wounds gape in his secret heart. He journeys sleepless through an unending night. Antagonist forces crowd across his path. A siege, a combat is his inner life. Even worse may be the cost, direr the pain. His large identity and all-harboring love shall bring the cosmic anguish into his depths. The sorrow of all living things shall come and knock at his doors and live within his house. A dreadful cord of sympathy can tie all suffering into his single grief and make all agony in all the worlds his own. He meets an ancient adversary force. He is lashed with the whips that tear the world's worn heart. The weeping of the centuries visits his eyes. He wears the blood-glued, fiery centaur shirt. The poison of the world has stained his throat. In the marketplace of matter's capital, Amidst the chafferings of the affair called life, he is tied to the stake of a perennial fire. He burns on an unseen original verge, that matter may be turned to spirit stuff. He is the victim in his own sacrifice. The immortal, bound to earth's mortality, appearing and perishing on the roads of time, creates God's moment by eternity's beats. He dies that the world may be newborn and live. Even if he escapes the fiercest fires, even if the world breaks not in a drowning sea, only by hard sacrifice is high heaven earned. He must face the fight, the pang, who would conquer hell. A dark, concealed hostility is lodged in the human depths, in the hidden heart of time, that claims the right to change and mar God's work. A secret enmity ambushes the world's march. It leaves a mark on thought and speech and act. It stamps stain and defect on all things done. Till it is slain, peace is forbidden on earth. There is no visible foe, but the unseen is round us. Forces intangible besiege. Touches from alien realms. Thoughts not our own overtake us and compel the erring heart. Our lives are caught in an ambiguous net. An adversary force was born of old, invader of the life of a mortal man. It hides from him the straight, immortal path. A power came in to veil the eternal light. A power opposed to the eternal will diverts the messages of the infallible word, contorts the contours of the cosmic plan. A whisper lures to evil the human heart. It seals up wisdom's eyes, the soul's regard. It is the origin of our suffering here. It binds earth to calamity and pain. This all must conquer who would bring down God's peace. This hidden foe lodged in the human breast man must overcome or miss his higher fate. This is the inner war without escape. So we remember that these words are in the mouth of Narad, the sage from paradise. Savitri's mother has asked him, why does there have to be suffering? And why was my beautiful, sweet daughter, why must she face this terrible fate? And he is explaining this. He's going to later on link it directly with Savitri, because she is one of the great beings who have come to uplift the earth. So, Rosa, you will begin?
Yes. But when God's messenger comes to help the worlds and lead the soul of earth to higher things, he too must carry the yoke. He came to unloose. He too must bear the pain that he would heal. Exempt and unaffected by earth's fate, how shall be through the ills he never felt.
Yes, thank you. So this is a general statement about the messengers of God. When they come to help the world, when they come to lead the soul of the earth to higher things, he's come to unloose the yoke of matter, of of ignorance, of falsehood. You remember we have said it before that a yoke, it is this wooden thing that is put across the shoulders. Either human beings wear a yoke when they want to carry too heavy things, but more commonly it's what we put on the bullock when we want him to pull the cart. So it's a heavy load that he has to carry. So those messengers of God, they come to unloose, to untie the poor bullock from the heavy cart he has to carry. But they themselves, they have to experience what it is like. The messenger of God must also carry that yoke that he came to unloose. He's come to heal the pain that human beings and animals suffer. But he too must bear that pain. And then Narad explains why. He says, if God's messenger is exempt, if he's free, if you're exempted from something, you don't have to do it or pay it. When people offer donations to Savitri Bhavan, they can get tax exemption. So it's like that. But if he's exempt, if he's not afflicted, if he doesn't have to bear the pain and the suffering, how can he cure these ills, these bad things, these unpleasant things that he came, if he hasn't felt them? Dhanalakshmi?
He covers the world's agony with his calm. But though to the outward eye no sign appears, and peace is given to our torn human hearts, the struggle is there and paid the unseen price. The fire, the strife, the wrestle are within.
So the amazing thing about God's messenger, when he comes, he may appear so calm, but he's carrying all the suffering of the world within him. So he covers the world's agony with his calm. But even though no outward sign appears, people who look at him, they can't see, they don't know that he is suffering. And so they see him and they feel peace. Peace is given to our human hearts. Still, he's going on with that inner battle. The struggle is there. And he has to pay the price, the ransom we read about last week. He has to pay that price in order to deliver the earth. So nobody sees him paying it. Nobody knows. But still, that is happening within him. The fire, burning, intense agony, the strife, the struggle, and the wrestle. Wrestle is when, two people fight together. So he is wrestling. He's wrestling with all kinds of things. We will read about some of the forces that he has to wrestle with. But that's going on within. It's an inner war. It's not usually seen on the surface.
He carries the suffering world in his own breast. Its sins weigh on his throat. Its grief is his. Earth's ancient load lies heavy on his soul. Night and its powers beleaguer his tired steps. The Titan adversary clutch he bears. His march is a battle and a pilgrimage.
So he's carrying the suffering world in his own breast. We can remember that Sri Aurobindo is writing this from his own experience. There are some small poems written at the time of the Second World War where he expresses that he's feeling within himself everything that's going on, the bombs dropping here, the terrible slaughter here and there. He's carrying all that within himself because of his vast universality. He's identified himself with everyone on earth, everything that happens. So he didn't show that in his face. His face is calm. People who came near him felt the touch of peace, blessing, compassion. But all this was going on within.
What is the title of poem?
The Cosmic Man, it's called. So because of that, because he's conscious, because he's aware, all the sins, all the things that people are doing which separate them from the divine. That this weighs on his thoughts like a heavy weight. The grief, the sadness, all the weeping of the world, it's his own. Earth's ancient load lies heavy on his soul. Earth is the material principle. And because of this dominance of matter, there's been a lot of suffering since the very beginning of life on earth. So it's an ancient load, this load of suffering. And he feels the weight of that ancient load on his soul. His soul has to be tremendously strong and calm to bear that heavy weight. So whatever steps forward he can make, whatever progress he can make in his mission, it happens slowly, against a lot of resistance. The powers of night. First of all, night is the darkness of unconsciousness. But it becomes more than that. It becomes the night of falsehood. That really, something that really resists the light, which doesn't want to open up to the light. And night has many powers. One of the powers of night is death. But yes, it's the power of falsehood, power of sin and evil. They beleaguer his tardy steps. Tardy means slow, it's taking time. And all the time he's under attack. This word beleaguer, it's a military word, particularly from the Middle Ages, when the people, the kings would gather their armies and they would besiege a city, and keep on attacking it. So as he moves forward from every side, night and its powers are attacking him, trying to hold him back. And that adversary, the enemy, the one who, that power or those powers who are against the divine, who are trying to resist the divine work, he gets hold of him, clutch. He's held. The Titan adversary's clutch he bears. This word Titan, Sri Aurobindo uses in Savitri as an equivalent of what in India we would call the Asura or the Rakshasa, the ones who are not surrendered to the divine, who follow their own massive, gigantic, exaggerated will of ego. So that adversary is. And Titan, of course, it means superhuman in size also. So his forward march that he comes to undertake in order to save the world, all the way, it's a pilgrimage, of course, but on a pilgrimage you may have to undergo a lot of hardships. Here in Tamil Nadu we have people who go on pilgrimages to Sabarimala or Tirupati or whatever. So they may have to undergo a lot of hardships on the way. But his march is even a battle. On the way he has to fight with these opponents in order to make his way ahead. Martin.
Life's evil smites, he is stricken with the world's pain. A million wounds gaped in his secret heart. He journeys sleepless through an unending night. Antagonist forces crowd across his path. A siege, a combat is his inner life.
So because this is an epic poem, Sri Aurobindo tries to express every one of the themes. His aim is to express every one of the themes as fully and completely and in as much detail as possible. So one can suggest these things in a short poem in just a couple of lines. But here he's developing it over most of this canto. This idea of the sufferings that have to be accepted by God's messenger. So there's lots of evil in life, things that are against the truth, that should not happen. They smite, they strike like an enemy warrior might hit you with his battle axe or his sword. No? And he, the messenger, is stricken with the world's pain. It's not his own individual pain, it's the pain of the whole world. So in his secret heart, 1,000,000 wounds are there. When we were reading in Book 2, we read about the descent of King Aswapati into the world of falsehood and night, no? And he had to bear the fierce inner wounds that are slow to heal. So that's what's happening. And he has to be always alert and vigilant. He journeys sleepless through the unending night. He can't afford to sleep. If he will sleep, if he will become unconscious, then something will happen. Across his path, the antagonist forces crowd, many of them, like a small army coming. Antagonist, it's like adversary. The two words are very similar. I mean, somebody who is coming against the truth. So his whole inner life is a siege. He's under attack. Those ancient cities, they used to be under siege. The enemy would be outside attacking, and a combat. He's not only encircled by these attackers, he has to fight back. No? Sergei.
Even worse, maybe because direly made, his large identity and all hovering wow shall bring the cosmic anguish into his depths. The sorrow of all living things shall come, and knock at his doors, and living thing his house. A dreadful chord of sympathy can tie all suffering into his single grief, and make all agony in all the worlds his own.
So this is that suffering of the cosmic man, no? When it's not only what the suffering that touches him directly as an individual, personally, he has widened his heart, he's widened his sense of identification, he's become vast, large, and his love shelters everything and everybody. So that brings the whole agony of the whole universe into his depths, his deeper parts. The sorrow of all living things shall come and knock at his doors. They want to be accepted in, that he recognizes and takes them into himself. So they live within his house. The house is the body. Yeah. So we know what is sympathy, the meaning of sympathy. It means feeling with. So we feel sympathy. Savitri's mother says, I even feel sympathy if I hear some story of the suffering that happened long ago. You know, that can touch my heart. And now this is my daughter, my own daughter. So yes, we can, it's one of the human characteristics, very, very special to human beings, a tie of sympathy. But that, in the case of such a vast individual, it becomes a dreadful cord, a string that ties all griefs, all sufferings into one single grief that he experiences. And he makes all the agony in all the worlds his own. He's carrying all this within himself. Ganga Lakshmi, would you read?
Yeah. He meets an ancient adversary force. He is lush with the whips that tear the world's worn heart. The reaping of the centuries visits his eyes. He wears the blood-blue, fiery Canto shirt. The poison of the world has stained his throat.
Yes. So there's an ancient force. It seems to have been there at least since the very beginning of life, if not before. An adversary force, a force that is adverse, that fights against the realization of the divine will in the world. It's ancient, it's been there for a very, very long time. He has to meet that ancient force and all its strength. He is lashed with the whips that tear the world's worn heart. The whole earth is suffering, no? The whole world is suffering, and it's as if it's being whipped. So he is being lashed. This takes us back to what we read last week, the picture of Christ. No, he was tied to a pillar and lashed with whips. But those were physical whips. These are subtle whips that bring pain to the heart. So all the weeping of the centuries, hundreds of years of weeping, he experiences it. And then there are two amazing images that Sri Aurobindo puts them together. First of all, the blood-glued, fiery centaur shirt. This is one of the allusions to Greek mythology that comes in Savitri. This refers to the death of the hero Hercules. Hercules was a half-divine being. And he was very powerful. And stories are told about all the many hard labors that he had to fulfill. The story that has come down to us tells that he was persecuted by the wife of Zeus, Hera. So she would represent the mother. But one great scholar in the ashram has said that really we should not understand the story like that. That really Hera is the mother and she is helping Hercules. He's a great yogi, and each of those labors, there are 12 labors that he has to perform, each of them is symbolic of a psychological step forward on his journey. But this now tells about his death. So it makes more sense in this context if we think that he's not just a big, brutal, strong man who has had to withstand the opposition of the gods and so on. If he's really a great yogi and he's sacrificing himself as one of the messengers of the higher power, it's more appropriate here in this place. So what happened with Hercules, it was a kind of trick. He was immortal. He was given immortality. Perhaps he was born half immortal and then because of all his great achievements he was gifted immortality, that he would only die when he chose to die. So how did it come about that he died? His wife was carried away by a centaur. You know what is a centaur? The man's body on first, and then behind a horse's body. This seems to represent perhaps something that the ancient Greeks saw when the first riders of horses, they encountered them. And if, those were people who lived on horseback, they came from Central Asia, and if the horse was grazing with its head down, you might see something like that. No? But it's also a symbolic being, because and Sri Aurobindo uses the word in a symbolic sense in this poem, that all the vital strength of the horse, the speed, the swiftness, is united with the mind, in one being. But anyway, in the stories, there were interactions between beings that the Greeks called centaurs and the ordinary human beings. And one of those centaurs stole away Hercules' wife. And Hercules chased after them, and he had some poisoned arrows, and he shot the centaur, and he was bleeding to death. And then he told Hercules' wife, the dying centaur, told her, "Take your cloth and dip it in my blood, and if ever Hercules is unfaithful to you, you put it on him, and he will be in love with you again." So she did what he said. But in fact, of course, that blood was full of the poison of Hercules' arrows. So when Deianira put the cloth on him, it clung to him, he couldn't get it off, and it was agonizing pain. And he was in so much agony that he chose to leave his body. So it says here, with a reference to the suffering, this blood-glued, fiery centaur shirt. This is the God's messenger has to experience something like that, something clinging and incredibly painful. And the second line, perhaps you Indians especially, you will notice this allusion more easily. The poison of the world has stained his throat. This is Shiva, no? Who in the creation, he swallows all the poison of the world and holds it in his throat, so his throat turns blue, so that the nectar of immortality the gods can get it.
He is called Nilakanta.
And because of that, he's called Nilakanta. Yeah. Leela, would you read?
In the marketplace of matter's capital, amidst the chafferings of the affair called life, he is tied to the stake of a perennial fire. He burns on an unseen original verge, that matter may be turned to spirit stuff. He is the victim in his own sacrifice.
So last week we read about the cross as the symbol of the sufferings of the world. No? Here it's this dreadful habit they had in the Middle Ages in Europe. If they felt that anybody was a sinner or had the wrong beliefs or was practicing witchcraft or something like that, the way they had of punishing them was to build a fire in the marketplace and burn that person alive in the center of the town. So there's an incident like that in a famous book called The Pilgrim's Progress. In the 18th century, that was the most read book in English after the Bible. And Sri Aurobindo obviously has read it several times, and he refers to it several times in his writings. And there's an incident. The pilgrim is traveling and on his journey towards the divine, and on the way he meets a friend, faithful, and the two men travel on together. But when they come to the city, it's called Vanity Fair, there faithful is seized by the town people, and he's tied to the stake and burned there in the center of the marketplace. So I think of that when I read this, but you can see it's a universal thing. The avatar, the divine, is tied to the stake of a perennial fire. It's going on and on, perennial, many, many years. He's there in the marketplace of matter's capital, the center, the most important, powerful place of matter. So what is causing the suffering? It is this power of matter. There he is in the center of the city, the capital city. There's a marketplace. We know it's a marketplace because Sri Aurobindo says chafferings. It's bargaining. All the bargaining that goes on, the buying and the selling and the bargaining, chaffering. So life, he says, is like that. It's like a bazaar in a way. And in that bazaar, the messenger is tied and he's suffering. And why? Why does he make this sacrifice? So that matter may be changed to spirit stuff. This is necessary for him to go through this process of suffering and purification in order that the matter itself can be transformed. He's burning there, not anywhere that we can see in this world, on an unseen, original verge, a kind of borderline. He's the victim in his own sacrifice.
The avatar is the victim, he becomes the victim.
That's the message he's been giving us, no? That it's the eternal suffers in a human breast. Yeah. I think we'll have to stop there today. So we can take the time to read these lines together.
But when God's messenger comes to help the world and lead the soul of earth to higher things, he too must carry the yoke he came to unloose. He too must bear the pang that he would heal. Exempt and unafflicted by earth's fate, how shall he cure the ills he never felt? He covers the world's agony with his calm. But though to the outward eye no sign appears, and peace is given to our torn human hearts. The struggle is there, and paid the unseen price. The fire, the strife, the wrestle are within. He carries the suffering world in his own breast. Its sins weigh on his thoughts. Its grief is his. Earth's ancient load lies heavy on his soul. Night and its powers beleaguer his tardy steps. The Titan adversary's clutch he bears. His march is a battle and a pilgrimage. Life's evil smites, he is stricken with the world's pain. A million wounds gape in his secret heart. He journeys sleepless through an unending night. Antagonist forces crowd across his path. A siege, a combat is his inner life. Even worse may be the cost, direr the pain. His large identity and all harbouring love shall bring the cosmic anguish into his depths. The sorrow of all living things shall come and knock at his doors and live within his house. A dreadful cord of sympathy can tie all suffering into his single grief and make all agony in all the worlds his own. He meets an ancient adversary force. He is lashed with the whips that tear the world's worn heart. The weeping of the centuries visits his eyes. He wears the blood-glued, fiery centaur shirt. The poison of the world has stained his throat. In the marketplace of matter's capital, amidst the chafferings of the affair called life, he is tied to the stake of a perennial fire. He burns on an unseen original verge, that matter may be turned to spirit stuff. He is the victim in his own sacrifice.